the committee meeting for the Audits of Government Efficiency. It is January 22nd. I'm Councilmember Dennis Zine, the chair. We have two other members, Councilmember Rosendahl, Councilmember LaBonge. We have 3 items on the agenda. I am here by myself. Hopefully someone else will arrive. But since it's now 2:03, we're going to begin. And I think, Mr. Clerk, we could take 1, 2, and 3 together. What do you think?
I think we can do all 3 of them together.
But you got to write them up.
I still have to write up separately, but they're all, related material.
What's easier for you?
You can take them all together and then specifically state the action at
Okay.
the end for each item.
All right, there we go. So let's do it. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, item number 1, controller report relative to the cost allocation plan 33 for fiscal year 2010-11. Second item is controller report relative to fiscal year 2008-09 Cap 33 audit reports for central services and fringe benefits and department administration support and compensated time off. And item 3 is controller report relative to fiscal year 2009-10 Cap 34 audit reports for central services and fringe benefits and department administration and support and compensated time off.
Someone's going to come up to the table and speak. Don't be shy. There's not a whole lot of people here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You are?
Lillian Sedlak, Office of the City Controller, Cost Allocation Plan Supervisor.
Cost allocation. This is good. This is how we get money.
Yes.
All right. Why don't you run us through this and tell us where we are and how we make it better.
We can make it better by hiring more departmental accountants, but we'll go through the rest of it first. Every year, the CAP is an annual cycle. We're required by the federal government, and the way it works is we gather the data. We put the data into the cost allocation plan. The external auditors audit that plan, and that's items 2 and 3. And after they audit it, we then send it to the federal government, and then it's approved, and that's item number 1. That's for 33.
And who are the external auditors?
Right now, there's Simpson and Simpson.
That sounds like a musical group, doesn't it? Simpson and Simpson?
It's music to our ears when they finish.
They do a good job. They do a lot of those projects. I understand that we see them here frequently. It's father-son now, isn't it? Simpson? I think his sons get involved in it.
I believe so.
I saw his son at one of the meetings recently. I thought that was, the tradition continues. So when it comes to, we've got fix, aging, administrative, city attorney, community development, disability, et cetera, police. While we do the analysis, I see these rates, 38%, 34%, 49%. Can you explain that part?
The cost allocation plan is made up of 3 different areas: fringe, central service, and department admin. And the ones that are in the audit report that you see are the cost centers that are approved by the federal government. We also do special rates, which are also audited by the external auditors, but they're set out in a separate report.
So I heard we have 500 special accounts. Would this fall into that category, special accounts?
No, because we're used for billing purposes from the Fed, so we're just an add-on to whatever fund they would be pulling from. So we're not a special fund.
And your comments?
I have no comments.
You have nothing to say?
Not yet.
Not yet. You will soon.
Mr. Rosendahl gets up here.
Okay. Mr. Rosendahl's arriving. We appreciate that. We'll wait till he gets settled in here. What do we use this reporting for? The actual report, what do we use it for?
We have to send the report to the federal government. That's part of our requirements.
Okay.
And then they check our rates and all of our numbers to make sure that what we're rebilling the feds for the overheads are correct.
And the information we're looking for when conducting this CAP report, we're looking for what specific information?
We look for almost everything, anything that we can, when a person comes to the city and they work, everything from the lights to the gas to the retirement to excess time, sick time paid out. The federal government has a very detailed listing of what we can recharge for our costs. And so what we do is we take the ones that we call allocable, and then we attribute them to the benefiting department. And then when the benefiting department charges any grants, they're allowed to charge those overheads as well.
Now, when we do the grants, does some of it go to the Sacramento 25% to them, or do we get the full grant? Do they take a piece of that action?
I think it depends on the grants, because we have a lot of them are in CDD or housing, ARA. I think the ARA grants that didn't get anything to the state. But we do have Caltrans grants that would be a portion of that for the state.
And the compliance, city, state, federal requirements, we meet those requirements when we do these analysis, the audits?
Yes.
Okay. Has there been any instances where we haven't been in compliance?
No, because after they're audited by the external auditors, the federal government audits them. We have another auditor, and then her rate, she may change some of the rates, but once her rates are approved, that's the ones that we use to bill.
And the cooperation with the departments that provide this information, is there cooperation with those departments within the city?
Yes, to the extent that we've had issues in the last couple of years because of the cutbacks in the accounting staff, and it has hurt us in a sense that we're also cut back too, but I feel the departments need the resources because, for example, ITA, they cut the departmental chief accountant, and that position's really hurting us, and I'm sure it's hurting the other sections in the controller's office as well. And the turnover too. So it's been difficult to collect the data. And I think because we have a great relationship with the federal government, that they've given us a little bit of slack.
So it's not through lack of cooperation, it's through lack of personnel to get the job done.
Yes. And I don't want to complain because I know everybody's in the same boat.
Well, a lot of people don't really think that is an important issue, but when it comes to the accountability, we've seen what's happened in other jurisdictions when there haven't been those checks and balances, and then it all comes into a very negative environment, which we've seen in the local jurisdictions that surround us.
Yes.
So it sounds like we're doing the best we can with what we've got.
Yes, and we've been really fortunate. Lito works for me, and he does a great job. He's probably doing 3 people's job plus the department's job. I don't know how he does it, and he's doing a great job, so he's been a big help.
Okay, so we've got the overhead, fringe benefits, costs, computerized overhead, fringe benefit rates, federal approval. So it sounds like we're doing everything right. Does the rate change annually? When are they effective and how are the rates applied? Do they change annually?
They do. It's based, a simple explanation is it's costs over salaries. So even if in the last couple of years, if costs even remain constant, the rates would rise just because our salaries in some departments have been cut so drastically.
But we're still required to do it, so the federal government's given us some leeway, but we're still obligated, required to do this because these are dollars that we're receiving, and they want to make sure it's done properly.
Yes.
We don't have some kind of shenanigans taking place that would be embarrassing, not only to the department, but the city and the leaders of the city.
Yeah, so when I don't want to say they give us leeway, but they work with us as far as giving us time to come up with our supporting documentation.
But we finally make the process work. It may be delayed, but we finally reached that goal.
Yes.
With the documentation that's required to show legitimacy to what we're doing with spending the money. Okay. That's all on 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Yes.
Because they're all combined here for our purposes. Mr. Colleague, Bill.
Yeah, let me just,
Rosenthal.
I agree with what I've just heard. I'm really pleased with how you've all worked on it. But let me just make a couple of comments, react to it one way or the other. It appears the city has been doing a good job in this area, as the auditor indicates that the schedules of the city cost allocation plan 33 and 34 present fairly in all material respects. 2, are there any legal or financial penalties if the city does not accurately calculate the cost allocation plan rates for departments that receive state or federal grant funding?
No, because by the time our rates are applied to the grants, they've been approved by the federal government. So as long as that's okay.
Then you're okay.
Yes, but, well, sometimes Caltrans comes in, for example, we're already doing CAP 36 and they were auditing CAP 31.
Right.
And it's hard for the departments to have data that goes back, what happened 5, 6 years ago.
Right.
It'd be better if they were a little bit faster, but that's just how their system works.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Please explain why the grant expenditure limitations placed on the Department of Aging prevent them from recovering administrative costs.
That's just the way their grants are written. I think they have Lito might know a little bit better, but I think they're capped at 10% of administrative costs, and that's just the way the grant is written.
I see. But it's somehow worked into it? How do you?
I think it's become over a process of time, but I can't really speak to what a department's grant looks like or what they bill, but I do know that in some cases, it just helps them keep they know every year is going to be 10%. So 1 year it's 42, 1 year it's 26, 1 year it's 33.
Can you explain that in the document before it comes to the Council for Action? Because I'd like to know the specifics on the Department of Aging.
Yes, and Matthias Farfan for Office of the Controller. As Lillian mentioned, each grant it's a standalone unit
Sure.
of itself, and many federal agencies, they each have their different grant requirements, and it's really up to the city whether or not the city wants to receive that grant. But sometimes that will be the condition on receiving the grant. They'll say, we'll only reimburse you for a certain percentage for the overhead. And so it's up to the city to decide whether they'll accept that grant or just let it pass.
I see. And when you add up all the grants that you guys are just talking about here now, how much money are we talking about?
Ooh, I think it's over
$16 trillion.
Yes, it's over $500 million.
I was going to say, wouldn't that be something, huh?
Yes, and you'll see that in the report we come
It's
out.
half a billion?
I believe so. In the single audit, it's about $500 million.
$500 million.
$500 million. You'll
Yeah.
see it in the single audit
Sure.
report.
When you give us that report, could you give us the breakdown of that, what it's for?
Okay.
So we get a full picture of
And this
that.
doesn't include overtime. This is just straight salary
Yeah.
benefits, not including overtime. If there's overtime, then who's going to pay for that?
Good question.
They can apply cap rates to overtime. It's just a little bit less because the lights and some of the other costs are already fixed in. So the overtime rates only really include a fringe, the retirement, some of the other worker comp.
So that would come out of the
Medicare.
general fund or the fund of that department?
No, it should come out of the grant, if they're working on a grant
It says
project.
they're not to be applied to overtime salaries.
We do special rates for that, because they have to be reduced.
But again, that'll be dependent on the language of the grant. Some of them, if they won't pay for overtime, they will pay for the straight time portion of it, but not the half hour that's above and beyond.
So that comes out of the general fund then?
Yeah, that would need to come out of the general fund.
Okay.
It all depends on if they have another special fund, because some grants are being worked on for a special funded
But
department.
is there ever a situation, say, you're going to work this on the regular time, you're not going to have any overtime for this, where the people working that detail would say, this is a straight time, you're not getting any overtime, to say you're not going to get it? Do we ever say that? If we're not going to get reimbursed for it, do we ever tell the employees, it's a straight time program, you're not getting overtime?
I would not be able to speak to that. That would be up to the general manager to explain what his process or her process is when it comes to those types of grants.
Okay.
And one last question, if I could. Are the Community Development and Housing Department's administration and support rate not computed because they are completely reliant on the grant funding? That makes sense.
CDD have a cap.
Do you remember, Leo? YCD, I think they already have an agreement with the feds. I'm not, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, are the Community Development and Housing Department's administration and support rate not computed because they are completely relevant on grant funding?
Relevant or irrelevant?
Relevant.
Reliant?
Reliant.
Reliant.
I'm not sure. I'd have to double check. I know we don't calculate them, but I'm assuming, I don't know.
Go ahead, if you speak in the microphone, identify who you are,
Yeah, for the record.
because we're going to put this on your shoulder, not hers.
That's right.
He does all the work.
He doesn't, he's letting you take the heat.
I'm not really familiar what,
Go ahead, have a seat, so we can hear you on the mic, and then identify. So we can just bring in more chairs, that's fine. Go ahead.
My name is Angelito Bautista. I work for Lillian.
You're with the Controller's Office also.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not really familiar with how the CDD, because we do calculate the rates based on what they submitted to us.
And again, Matthias Farfan for the controller. It all depends, what also plays into it is how the department is billing the federal government. So sometimes the grants are worded such where if the department is tracking that time directly, sometimes they will bill those costs directly to the grant. And in that case, then they would not apply an overhead for that particular item. And that's where it gets into an area where sometimes some departments will decide to bill directly for an expenditure that's been incurred as opposed to using the cap rates. And again, that all goes into what the grants allow or don't allow. So it would be grant specific. So it would depend on which particular grant we're talking about here.
That makes sense. But again, what I generally heard is it's $500 million that we get in grants every year.
Now, that's citywide or just certain departments?
That would be citywide.
That includes proprietary?
It includes proprietaries included there as well.
As an opening, it's $500 million. The second question becomes, how much would be or could be or might be coming out of the general fund, which is always our biggest problem, general fund money versus other kinds of money.
We don't look at that. We have not tracked that. We're more in, we try to stay out of billing, so we.
You've done good. But I think it's important for us to know if we're getting $500 million in grants, what impact it has on the general fund. And then, obviously, my preference would be that any cost associated with what it's paid out of the grant, obviously, because we can't afford to have bigger issues in our general fund. So I just want more clarity, basically.
So a lot of folks have never really heard of it. You know, what you are relating at this particular committee meeting, if you'd ask the average citizen on the street, they wouldn't know what the heck you're talking about. They know a grant, but they don't know about the whole process that takes place to make sure it's all done in the proper fashion. So we get the money, we spend the money, then we tell the government what we're doing with that money, the overhead to run that particular program, whatever it be, whatever departments.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds logical. And we've obviously done a good job because it shows that we're in compliance. We're not having some problems with the reporting of it. There may be a delay, but the fact is we're still doing it in proper fashion. Okay. We do have one public speaker. Do you have anything else? Anyone? Do you have anything else? We have one public speaker on this matter. Dan Jones? Is it Dan or Don?
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Don Justin Jones.
Okay. Will you have a seat, please? You can have a seat there. This just in. You.
Sorry, sir?
I said this just in, you.
Yes, this is me.
You have a seat, have a seat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've prayed on what to say because I'm not quite sure how to proceed. So I want to trade on some, what I hope are some good feelings that still exist with Bill and me. Over 30 years, going back to LAPAC and advocating for the community, I think I've been able to establish that my heart is in the right place for the folks. I come here because I'm in possession and have asked that the state auditor send 5 copies of the audit to the committee with regard to a state audit that was done by the state auditor that reports a shortfall of Caltrans in deriving revenue to the city. There is a 710 freeway that was supposed to have been built, 500 homes lay in the pathway. The state auditor audited these and found that the Caltrans had foregone $22 million in revenue that it collects. That revenue is supposed to go not only to the county but also to the city. However, there's been no monitoring of this, and so the amount of shortfall, the amount of money that has not been collected, which would have gone to education, 62% of the revenue should have gone to education. So I'm asking for your forbearance and asking how it's possible, perhaps if staff or yourself could direct me, how we could bring some light into this and collect the money that's due to the state, or due from the state to the city and to our school children.
John, if I can interrupt, what kind of money are you talking about?
Well, I haven't done the numbers. The state auditor, which audited these, said that $22 million was foregone between July 2007 and December 2011. Of that amount of money on page 13 of the audit, they say state law requires the county to distribute half the rental income it receives from Caltrans to the city in which the property is located. Our numbers in the community indicate that 20% of the property is unrented as a policy of theirs to keep them vacant, to drive out the tenants so that they can therefore charge fair market rate. And so I'm one of a group of tenants that have been organizing in this. We've had workshops. We've produced audits. We've actually looked at this page by page and have come up with what we find using a probable cause standard to find fraud, cronyism, nepotism in the letting of contracts, no contract between Caltrans and the General Services Department who have responsibility for these. So when we take a look at this, I mean, we look at the pages and the statements here, and we're not putting words in the state auditor's mouth.
Okay, let me say, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, cap 1, 2, and 3, right? What we
Yes,
just
sir.
discussed, this is totally different.
It is, sir. It's a matter of,
Okay.
it's not on the agenda. I
Okay,
was told
all right.
if I wanted to address something, I could.
Okay, it's not on the agenda, so we can't really debate the issue. We've noted the issue. I didn't want the controller to think that there is a question, that you're studying your notes carefully. This is a total separate subject. I know the 710 freeway, I think I had a meeting with you and the city attorney recently regarding this matter, and the state controller's audit and Caltrans, all that issue, but there's a whole separate, because I see some puzzling faces on the folks from the controller's office. You know, what do we have to answer now? So it has nothing to do with the controller's audit.
That's
So
why I
with
prayed on
that,
it before I came.
I will then say for the item that we just went through, items 1, 2, and 3, that we receive and file those, that will go through to the council. The questions that my colleague, Mr. Rosendahl, has, hopefully that can be addressed prior to the vote on the council when it comes up. When will that be on the council for, sir?
Probably sometime next week.
All right, sometime next week you can get that. And then, Don, thank you for the information. We can schedule that for
Chairman?
an agenda, and the proper form would be to have an issue with that if we wish to do that.
Don't want to be picky, but it's a note and file. You actually reviewed the recommendations, and the action. Just note and file.
Oh, it's okay, note and file. Okay. No, then, Mr. Rosendahl had questions that he wanted to answer, so they can do that before it comes to the council. All right, so with that, we are adjourned. We thank you. Thank the Controller's Office for that information, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.